Okay, so this is another episode of World Paranormal Research Society. We have a very special guest today, Saira and Kadeer. And welcome to the show, Saira. You're here with Timothy and Alexandria. How you doing today?
I'm very well, thank you. How are you?
We're doing good. I had a quick question before we actually get into the topic for today. Was part of the
Yeah.
topic anyway. Um, can you, in your own words, kind of describe the differences for our audience for what a difference between a psychic and a medium is?
Okay. Well, most people have psychic ability. It's kind of built into us. And a psychic will be able to, read all sorts of different things. I mean, quite often I will connect with my spirit guides working psychically, look at the future, see what's going on, look at the past, things like that. A medium primarily works with connecting with loved ones, the spirits of loved ones that have crossed over. So that's the main difference between the two.
Okay, and yeah, I know a lot of our audience is either they're either practice Judaism or they're Christians or that we have some Muslims that listen to. And what strikes me very interesting is those would be the most outspoken people against psychics and mediums because they don't understand or realize that if you're a Jewish person or if you're a Christian person or if you're a Muslim, this exists. People can really do this. It's actually in the Old Testament Bible. It talks about this. And so I would
Yeah.
encourage, yeah.
And, I suppose one thing that you can't really dispute is that all of these people are spiritual people. They're drawn towards spirituality, hence their religion.
Yes, exactly. But a large number of people kind of brush it off. They don't believe it. And and those people I would encourage to read the actual Bible that you use, and you'll see it in the Bible itself, which is very interesting. But
Yeah.
and
I wonder how that conversation goes then.
it never goes over well. Trust me. It does in the Jewish community, but in the Christian community, we have a lot of people want to argue the point, and I always refer back to the Bible, and then they've never seen it because they don't read it, and once they see it, then they start to open up more to it. And we firmly believe in people that have psychic abilities. We believe in mediums. That and unfortunately for someone like you who is real and you're an award winner and someone like you that is real, there's a lot of people that put on theatrics and they pretend to have the abilities that you have, and
Yeah.
that damages when a real person, when these real abilities comes along. That's what causes a lot of the issues.
Absolutely. I mean, one of the things, obviously, working as a psychic or a medium is none of it is really governed by anyone or anything. So anyone could literally set themselves up as a psychic or a medium or any other kind of reader without necessarily having the experience or qualifications to justify that. So, yes, unfortunately, you do get a lot of people that are just out to make money, the charlatans, and maybe they think they do have an ability, but they are literally, they've got a long way to go, a long way to learn.
Yeah, and actually, a crazy story before we got started with this interview, like probably an hour ago, I had the television on, and a friend of mine was on the television, and he's being addressed as a psychic, and we know he's not a psychic, and so the television network decided to call him a psychic, and I know that he just sat there and he let them do that, and I was kind of shocked that he didn't say anything. But he's a well-known public figure, and we're not going to mention his name. But for those of you that are in the paranormal community, I'm sure you know who I'm talking about. But that's over here in the North American side. But anyway, I know Alexandra, you have some questions.
Yeah, Sarah, first I'd like to welcome you to the show, and I think it's really brilliant that we're able to have a person such as you that's an international psychic medium. You're, of course, a television psychic, and you're a multi-award winner for the year 2023. And I think a lot of listeners may want to know, you've explained the difference between a psychic and a medium. So, what is the difference when people call themselves an empath? How does that fit into the mixture there?
So an empath will be able to pick up on the emotions and the feelings. They're highly sensitive people. That doesn't necessarily mean that they will have any of the other sort of clair abilities, such as clairvoyance or clairaudience. So they're relying primarily on their empathic abilities to obtain information. And quite often, what we find here with empaths is that they really do struggle with that ability because they are so hypersensitive and don't know how to shut down.
Yeah, that makes sense because myself, I'm a lifelong empath, and I have difficulty sometimes going to crowded places like a shopping mall or an event where there's lots of people. If like you just indicated, if you don't have the ability to kind of create a barrier or sort of shut down for a while, it can be emotionally and physically draining.
And overwhelming as well. I mean, I'm an empath as well, so I do not like crowded places at all. So, yeah, it's taken me a long time to kind of deal with that, which is primarily why I work from home a lot, to be fair.
Yeah. Have you had this ability your entire life, or when did you pick it up that you were able to have these abilities, these psychic abilities?
Well, they first started when I was around 7 years old. Um, and night after night, is my clairvoyant ability that really kicked in somehow. For whatever reason, it activated at that age. And I used to wake up night after night and I used to see the faces of spirits, like hundreds of them, floating towards me. Um, and this carried on for a while. I was getting obviously hardly any sleep. My parents didn't understand because I didn't really have the vocabulary to explain what was going on. So this was when I had my first real connection with my spirit guides, who basically removed that ability away from me. And to be honest with you, I do not suffer, I've never suffered from anything like that ever since. I can open up and experience different things, but I won't get that same experience that I had back then. But also, there was a situation when I was about 4 years old, and I don't know whether this has anything to do with my psychic ability, but I believe quite strongly that I was abducted by an ET. I had an experience that was so vivid, so real, and I disappeared as well. Okay, so I was gone for a matter of time. I have no recollection of what happened during that missing time, but I do remember what happened before and afterwards. We lived at the back of our house. We had wheat fields. It was the middle of summer. The wheat was high, and there was this like loud, almost like mechanical noise that was literally so loud, and like the wind was blowing as though something was landing, but there was nothing there.
Right.
Okay. Um, and then the next thing I remember was my sister. I was still in the same spot. I hadn't moved. My sister coming out because she was looking after me, yelling at me, telling me where was I hiding, where did I go, and ushering me straight into the house again. So I have no idea what happened in between those times, and the sound had gone. Everything had gone when she called me in. It was as though a portion of my life just disappeared at that moment.
Wow.
So I wonder whether that has anything to do with my psychic abilities also.
Yeah. And wow, that's an amazing story. You know, and a lot of people have claimed that they've been abducted, and it's kind of been brushed off over the decades here. But now, with the especially in the U.S. side, where the Pentagon's now releasing all this footage, and they're now acknowledging alien crafts out there, it is
Mm-hmm.
highly possible that all these people that were saying that they were abducted before, maybe they were abducted before. Maybe we just didn't know it or didn't believe it at the time. Although I've always believed it, but I'm saying is in general, the populations of people just didn't believe it. But you know, how do you explain all this stuff that's being released now by various governments talking about UFOs? And it's pretty interesting actually to see that proof is actually out there in video and audio. And
Absolutely, absolutely. There is so much proof out there. It's literally unbelievable. And there are so many people experiencing this sort of thing, but it's a very difficult thing to ever raise in terms of, a subject. Not many people talk about it.
yeah, because they get laughed at. Usually, if they talk about it, they don't get believed. But I think it's something that should have been believed from the very first story of somebody being abducted. Because like I said, there's evidence that UFOs do exist.
And I had a question for you because I know different psychics, different mediums use various tools and stuff. What's your opinion for our listeners on tarot cards? Because I know they've been around for a very, very long time. So, what's your opinion for the listeners on the use of tarot cards?
I absolutely love them. I use my tarot cards. Also, got some other decks. I've even created my own deck to use. I quite like using them because they help me to navigate my way around a reading. So I know that I'm giving absolutely as much as possible to the client. So primarily, I probably won't use them if I'm doing straightforward mediumship, but for a reading that encompasses, the future and what they need to be paying attention to. I mean, from my perspective, a reading is supposed to deliver somebody to their best possible outcome. So, if I can give more than just spirit contact, then that's what I want to do. I know a lot of people think that tarot cards are bad or are evil, but really what they do and what they should do is spark the intuition, okay? Almost like create a gateway for your psychic abilities to come through. That's what they're supposed to be used for. I mean, personally speaking, we are talking now on the other side of the spectrum to things like Ouija boards. They're perfectly safe to use.
Well, we've over the decades here, we've used Ouija boards, and I can tell you that, yeah, you can use them safely, but they can bring about, in our experience, in our personal experience, depending on where we're at and what we're doing, they can bring about dangerous activities. And
But it all goes back to how you use the tools and what your, I think, intention and intent is very
Mhm.
important. I think in anything that you use, it's your intention and how you protect yourself and ground yourself. I think those are important. And then closing your circle off after you've done whatever it is that you're doing, I think it's important to close that off.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And, I would much prefer, I mean, I don't even have a Ouija board, never used one myself. So I prefer to stick with things like my cards and my psychic abilities for doing readings. But it was a question I was actually asked earlier today: can loved ones come through Ouija boards? And my answer really was, ideally, you need to be a trained medium to work with a Ouija board, and it definitely wouldn't be my first preference for somebody to try.
now you're talking about using a Ouija board in like the setting of a seance or something like that, where somebody's letting somebody come through their body versus letting using the Ouija board in a setting where you're just trying to have the spirit be among you versus being through you.
Well, I was only really answering a question that came through on a live session that I was doing. So, from my perspective, what she was asking is, can she do this alone to connect to her loved ones? Okay, so to get a message through from one of her loved ones, and I didn't feel like that was a very good idea.
No, it's not a very good idea. You're absolutely right.
And I think I'm going to just talking about Ouija boards too. I personally don't think it's a good idea that in a lot of children's stores that they sell Ouija boards. I don't agree with that at all.
Oh no, I mean, children, as we are well aware, are really gifted, are really psychic. So, but then I'm not trained, so it's actually potentially quite damaging.
Yeah, and you know, I've studied a little bit on that, and I've looked at a lot of the research on why children are more gifted than when they become older and become adults. And there's a gland that's in the brain that they say over time, as you grow older, like by just using toothpaste and drinking certain water, that gland becomes calcified, and that gland is what a lot of people refer to as the, I guess you could look at it as the third eye or whatever, that you have that extra ability to sense things and see things. So when you're younger, it's highly active, but as you get older, because of the fluoride and things like that, it actually calcifies that gland and it diminishes it, and that gland never really comes functioning again. And there's a doctor that's doing a study because he unfortunately, in his position in the medical field, he meets a lot of patients right when they're about to die. So he started doing this research, and he says that gland will become open again right at the point of death. And so
Wow.
and that's why a lot of people see things like that's what he was trying to explain, because it's been a mystery on why people wake up and start talking to people right before they die, or they see things.
Hmm.
And yeah, it's pretty interesting. Um, have you ever
Yeah,
had
that
a
would be the pineal gland, won't it? That you're referring to.
I, I
The
forget
pineal
I
gland.
forget the name of it off
It's
the top of my
it's the
head.
it's exactly what Sarah said. Yeah, it's that gland.
Okay, yeah, and you know what? I've studied it so much, but I haven't been back to it for like a year, so it completely slipped my mind on what gland it was. But yeah, that gland becomes calcified, and that gland, but when you're younger, is so active and it doesn't have these contaminants on it, so that's why people are able to see stuff, and that's why in certain countries, and especially among certain indigenous people, they don't have this fluoride and all this other stuff in their water and toothpaste or whatever. They have a stronger ability as adults because the gland is still active, and so
Absolutely, yeah. And also, children are very open. You, as a child, you just take the world as it is. You don't sit there and judge it and think if this is right or wrong. So you're far more open to experience all sorts of different things as part of your experience of the world. Okay, so looking at obviously the conventional world and also the spiritual world as well.
yes. And have you ever had a conversation with somebody when you're talking with them, and just not even they're not even talking to you about psychic stuff or medium stuff. They're just talking to you about something just random, just off the topic. Have you ever had a conversation with someone where maybe somebody was trying to communicate through you to send them a message as you were talking to them?
Yes, yes, I have many times. I mean, I didn't really start working professionally um, until I was about 17 years old. So obviously, I would have conversations with friends, and in my young sort of adult life, before I took this up as a full-time occupation, I'd have a normal job, normal friends, blah blah blah, and they would sometimes like talk about their issues and problems, and the answer would just come straight through me. And I remember it was my partner's brother's sister. We're having conversation with her, and it's almost as though I just kind of went off into a daze, and these words came out of my mouth, and all I said was, "Is your mother better now?" And I had absolutely no idea that there was anything wrong with her mother. The words just came out. I couldn't control it. And she said, "Oh, yeah, she's out of hospital now. How do thank you for asking." And it's like, I didn't even know. It kind of really shocked me. When you say something, you don't even realize what you've said.
Yeah.
I do get quite a lot also in readings as well.
I had a question for you too, because I know that I've read a lot about the incredible work of Dr. John Dee and his scrying and the Enochian alphabet and all that. Of course, he was an advisor to Queen Elizabeth I, but I just thought that some of his works were very groundbreaking, and he was way before his time. Do you have an opinion on Dr. John Dee, or?
I don't, unfortunately, because that's not something I have ever done any research into, unfortunately.
Okay. No, that's fine. And I know that where are you based out of currently?
I'm living in Shropshire, in a very idyllic little country spot.
And you've been on television before. What multiple shows have you been on?
So I was a studio psychic for a psychic channel on Sky TV called Psychic Today, and I was a studio psychic for many years. Until I moved, and then did a lot of remote work. So I would host the show from home and things like that. So I've done countless shows on that channel. Also worked for ITVB, and I've had other opportunities as well that unfortunately I haven't been able to take up from other TV channels.
Yes. And like for us, we've turned down 3 offers ourselves, and to be on television, because we just feel like when they approach us for what we do and what we know, they want more theatrics than the realities and the actual real science and the real research on what we find. They want more theatrics. They like acting because they're trying to sell a show. And
Yeah.
and you may go to a location and you may not have anything happen at that location all night, or the studio or the production company, they're not going to be happy that nothing happened all night, because now they've done filmed there all night and they want something to happen. So they want you to put on these theatrics. So that's why we've kind of steered away from that, although we do know a lot of people and associate with a lot of people that are on television, and that seems to be their number one complaint, is that they just get tired of acting. It's
you've got to be authentic.
Yeah, and I think a lot of television shows, I'm not going to name names, have sort of ruined it, or really has put a negative spin, because there was one TV show where a psychic or medium, I don't know, I can't remember what the person was, when there was a demonic entity, they told them that they should go practice yoga after. And I watched that episode, and I just said, to me, that's very irresponsible. I've never seen any reference for somebody to tell somebody to go practice yoga, unless they're trying to ultimately, super relax them or something. I just didn't understand the logic.
Well, the way that this happened is these people went into these people's house and they told them their house was full of demons, and that if they wanted to get rid of the demons, they needed to practice yoga. And so we thought that was absolutely absurd, the advice that they were giving them. And
no, absolutely. I mean, I've never heard of anything so ridiculous. That's just trying to pluck something out of a hat. It really, isn't it?
I just thought it was very irresponsible. If an individual doesn't know how to deal with something, they should just be honest about it and say, we're going to call in somebody that's an expert in the field. And they had mentioned it on several occasions, and I thought, good God, I mean, and this is on television, and people just eat this stuff up.
Yeah.
So I guess the Catholic Church is going to have to teach their exorcists how to do yoga.
Well, that would be a fun watch, wouldn't it?
Yeah, that would.
Do you I know there's some people, I know psychics and mediums that use pendulums. They do what they call flame readings. I haven't done any of that myself, but do you use a pendulum at all?
I have done, yes. I used to use one for actually doing like chakra dowsing or chakra readings.
Right.
So not so much in a normal conventional reading. I mean, I wouldn't use a pendulum then. But if I am doing a healing session, because I'm also a healer, then I will use a chakra pendulum and douse the chakras before I do a session. So I haven't done flame readings, although I have to admit, anything is a kind of scrying, really, isn't it? So
yes.
Anything you focus on, whether it could be a candle flame, you can actually get insight from there, as well as you could get insight from a crystal ball by gazing at it. So it's really the act of gazing, as opposed to the method or what you're gazing at, that is actually giving you the insight. I have actually picked up stuff. This is when I was doing, I first started working full time, and literally my psychic senses were going overboard. And I was actually able to read my cup of tea, the reflection
Oh, wow.
on my cup of tea. Yeah. That's because my senses were so heightened at that particular point in time.
Wow. And you know, if going back to the Bible, God in the Bible spoke through fire. People have seen the fire and heard his voice multiple times. And so there's two different instances I know of for sure. And one of them involving the burning bush, and then one of them involving when God was giving calling Moses up to get the 10 Commandments on top of the mountain. God was actually speaking through fire, and the Israelites were scared. They didn't want to go up the mountain with Moses because they were terrified of this voice coming through the fire. And so that's a very interesting story. So I think there's a lot of ability and a lot of potential there with using flame, using fire, stuff of that nature.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, all you've got to think about really is how relaxing and therapeutic it is to sit there in front of a log fire and watch it burn. You know, so you can see how somebody can kind of get into the zone and start to pick up information or tune into their spirit guides or whatever quite easily through that.
I had another question too, because I know a lot of people on this side of the pond here go to a lot of garage sales, yard sales, estate sales, and a lot of people have made reference to that when they bring objects home, that disturbances happen, what have you, because they were owned by the previous owner. Do you believe, as a psychic medium, that these objects can carry the residual energy of a previous owner? Have you encountered that?
Oh, absolutely, 100%. Objects carry energy, same way as houses carry energy as well. So whatever goes on in the house, that can kind of almost like settle into the walls, the very structure of the building, and therefore create for some people paranormal events. I mean, I remember when I was little, my mother's brother, he actually died way before I was born. He died out at sea. So his body was never found. There was never able to be a burial or anything. But my mum had his camera, like really old camera. And every time she got this camera out, I don't even know whether she actually knew how to use it because it's one of those really old ones.
Mm-hmm.
And my dog would literally freak out. Okay, we started to get some like paranormal experiences happening in the house only when she got that camera out. I wouldn't say that the camera was haunted, but I definitely feel as though his energy was very strongly on it. And my dog would literally cower behind the sofa and shake for about 3 days.
Oh, geez.
Mm.
So would that be so? Speaking of that, what would be your, I guess, worst experience or most scariest experience? Would that be it, or what would be it?
That's my scariest experience. Well, there's quite a few.
Yeah.
There is quite a few. I don't know whether I'd call it sort of. There's one that I was actually doing a house clearing for someone, and from the outside of the house, everything appeared to be normal. But the moment I kind of almost like crossed over the boundary through the gate and started walking up to the front door, I was hit with the most horrendous fear. Horrendous fear. So much so, I literally wanted to turn my tail and run the other way.
Wow.
Okay? I had someone with me that convinced me to go in. And I went in and I cleared the house for them, and everything was fine. But the information I was picking up on, again, I could not have ever known. So I was picking up the previous resident there, certain things that he was into that were very negative in nature. And this was all confirmed to me after the session. She went back and she researched, and everything I'd said was true. So I would say that was my sort of one of my scary experiences. I did have something almost like try and materialize, as well, as I was sort of meditating one day, I could hear like this crackling and fizzing. It kind of made me open my eyes up in shock, and I could see like a mist of, like, I don't know, it was like fire, you know,
Mm-hmm.
like, you know, the sort of what do you call it, smoke, yeah,
Yeah.
from a fire. And then all of a sudden it disappeared. But I was woken up, or you know, brought back to reality with this kind of fizzing sound.
Oh,
You know,
gee. Ooh.
Wow.
yeah. So I don't know what it was that was trying to materialise. However, I did cleanse the house straight afterwards,
Oh,
just in
yeah.
case.
And have you ever been called in by authorities to look for individuals that are missing, under mysterious circumstances? Because I know a lot of authorities use psychics, mediums to try and look for individuals that have disappeared.
No, I haven't. But I mean, obviously the UK is slightly different. You know, with that, they don't tend to utilise psychics as much, perhaps, as the US does.
Right.
However, I have done a lot of sessions with people on missing persons cases, okay, or not so much in missing persons, but where there has been foul play, okay, and there are some details, etc., that are missing from the case, or as far as the relatives are concerned. So I have done some work from that capacity online, but dealing with families as opposed to authorities.
Right. And I know some psychics, some mediums use sage or sweetgrass to smudge to help cleanse the area. Do you use those at all?
I do. I do. I tend to, if I'm going to just cleanse my aura, I just use plain salt for that. But yeah, I have been known to use sage smudge sticks. I actually quite like burning bay leaves, actually. I think that's a quite nice way to cleanse a property too.
Yeah. I'm concerned about the younger generations, especially in Canada and in the U.S., because my fear is that they're going to start burning cannabis to try to cleanse themselves. And so that seems to be the new thing that's really on the rise in North America. Nothing against cannabis, but I'm saying it's not to be used for that purpose, for sure. Um,
No, no. I mean, there was. I bought a load of what's called mugwort, because that helps you. If you burn it, it's supposed to open up all your psychic senses. You can also sleep with it under your pillow to have sort of prophetic or precognitive dreams. I've still got some of this stuff, and
what's it called?
when I was doing my
Mudwork.
online, pardon,
I was just asking, what was it called? It was called Mudwork.
mugwort,
Oh,
yes.
okay.
It's a herb, and you're supposed to burn it, and you know it's very effective for opening up your clairvoyant abilities. It actually really is good. It doesn't last long, and I was doing some research about it, and somebody tried to smoke it apparently and passed out.
Oh my
Oh
God.
man! Wow. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is the thing. Some people just get an idea into their head, and there's not really much you can do to dissuade them.
Right. Yeah. So let me ask you this: if so, you said you're currently still doing this, but now you're doing it from the home. If people wanted to contact you for like a reading or something, or is that something that you do? Or
Absolutely, yes. So there's a variety of different ways that people can get hold of me. So through my website, which is modern-mystic.co.uk, and also through my Etsy store, I do readings there, and that's quite popular.
oh, okay, awesome.
Again, being a psychic medium too, what's your favorite crystal and how do you like to use it, or gemstone?
I would say my favourite, I've got quite a few actually. I mean, I wear every single day when I do my psychic work, I wear moldavite
Mm-hmm.
and a stone called azeztulite. So this, you know, when you're talking earlier about being an empath,
Yes.
okay, and needing to guard your energy, I use that to kind of sustain my energy so I don't lose energy when I'm doing readings, and it keeps me nice and protected. I wear them because I find them really effective. The only reason I'll do anything is because I find it effective. I also love selenite as well. I think that's a really, really lovely stone.
So I'm assuming that we were talking about how houses can contain energy of things that's happened in the houses. I know our last guest is a paranormal investigator, and he did Leap Castle, and I don't know if you ever heard of Leap Castle, but we were talking about how castles are made out of stone, and how
Yeah.
that may be why castles are so active with like paranormal activity.
Absolutely, and to be honest with you, it doesn't really have to be made, well, a building doesn't have to be made out of stone to have paranormal activity. The activity could even be on the land that the house was built on, even for modern buildings as well. But absolutely, stone will hold energy. I mean, I personally love castles. I absolutely love and adore them. You know, they don't freak me out at all. But yes, also, what's quite interesting about certain properties is that if there has been a death on that property or in that property, it will be a lot more prone. It's almost like a doorway opens, or there is like a tear between the dimensions, and more stuff can come through.
Well, I mean, I'm glad you said that it can even happen on modern buildings that's built on top of land where something's happened, because
Hmm.
we tend to, like, when we go out and we do investigations ourselves, we tend to look for older buildings, and if it's a modern building, it's kind of a turnoff for us because we're assuming that not a lot's going to be happening there. But I guess the thought process is that if something bad's happened on that land, doesn't matter if it's a brand new building, you could still get activity there.
Yeah, I mean, it's one thing that I was actually thinking about the other day. You know, if you think about the amount of people that have lived and died on Earth, you know, as long as they've been human beings, you know, chances are that all of us are probably living on top of, you know, somebody's dead body or somebody's remains.
Yeah.
Surely.
Well, yeah, because that makes sense. Because I know I've been to Scotland several times, and I had taken my boys to Edinburgh, and we were doing some kind of a tour, and we were standing on an area that had now in modern times was a car park, or where they park vehicles now, and I felt deathly ill. I was nauseated. I was sick. I had a massive headache, coming to find out after that, Edinburgh is kind of small. It's on a volcanic rock, anyways. It very limited real estate there. That what they had done is that had been a cemetery, maybe in the Middle Ages, and they had just taken the grave markers, tombstones off, left the thousands of bodies there, and just made a car park. And I thought, holy, and that exactly to your point there, that we are walking on this car park that underneath it had thousands of bodies.
Yeah, yeah. And, you know, if you think about, you know, even a few hundred years ago, you know, what they used to do is just knock down old houses and then build a new one, you know, on the land or on top of the old house. I mean, my house here, we've discovered this about a week ago. We have an underground structure under the garden, you know, so there's another building underneath my garden, and no one knows anything about it. It's very, very strange.
Wow.
Can you get into it?
No,
No.
not without. I've been shown it. Okay, so what we're looking at here, unfortunately, is not complete. You know, there's no roof or anything, but we're definitely looking at the foundations of another building underneath. I mean, the house itself is about 200 years old.
Yeah, you were saying that last week. That's what you had a call. I guess that's what you were talking. That's what you were dealing with last week, was that this issue.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Okay. Yeah. When you told me you was dealing with a 200-year-old building, the first thing that I thought was, man, I'd like to do an investigation there.
It is a fascinating place, but the energy here is really lovely. I even had something materialise when I was showing my daughter around the house when we first moved in. I had literally a coin drop from thin air and land in front of us. It was
Wow.
amazing.
Wow.
Mm.
Was it an old coin or a modern coin?
It was a modern coin, but it literally just dropped.
Wow. Yeah, that's awesome.
You know.
So,
Mm.
so let me ask you this. Now, for people that may be, because there's a lot of people that are getting into tarot readings, if for people wanting to do that or experiment with that, what advice would you give them to, should they do it? Should they not do it? What deck should they use if they want to do it? You know, what do you recommend?
I mean, I recommend that if it comes to a deck, just to go one that's very visually appealing, visually exciting, interesting. You know, has depth, has colour, and go if they want to choose a deck for themselves. In terms of working with a deck, I mean, ultimately, what you've got to remember is it's there to spark the intuition. It isn't necessarily there to create connection with spirit. Okay. But you do need to create a connection with someone else if you're going to really see your cards come to life. You know, so you can practice on friends and family. There's no real sort of caution that you need to take place here. It never hurts to have some kind of protection or ask for protection when you start to do a reading, but you know, if you keep it sort of light and low key and don't put that pressure on yourself, you know, you'll start to develop your abilities to read the tarot intuitively quite quickly.
Have you ever heard of the Crowley cards?
Oh God. Yeah.
What do you?
Yeah.
What,
Okay. So that. Okay. Yeah. There is that deck I didn't particularly like.
what was it about the Crowley cards that turned you off?
Um. Well, actually, I didn't own them. It was my mother who had them, and I was living with my mother. I was a teenager at the time, so about 1920. Started my psychic journey off at that point.
Wow.
And she had these cards. She really liked them. And I mean, I had like the most horrible nightmare. I never used the cards themselves, but I remember like the full card in it, and it kind of looked quite demonic, you know. And I had a nightmare that my face was changing into this figure, you know, with the same sort of demonic thing, and I was literally losing my, I suppose, my soul or my my faculties. I couldn't speak. I was losing myself and just becoming this thing. So that's why I don't like the Crowley deck.
Yeah, and that's and you know what? There's a thrash metal band from the '80s, and the name of the band's called Megadeth. The lead singer used to be in a band called Metallica, and he was into
Oh, really?
he was into a lot of this stuff. And in his song, it was on a CD called "Peace Sells, But Who's Buying." On the song, "The Conjuring," he actually sings an entire real conjuring ritual. And so he said to this day, since he converted to Christianity, he'll never perform that song again. And he said that playing that song over and over again on stage really affected his life negatively, and it took him converting his way of life, his religious thoughts, and all that to really get away from that. And so he's no longer into that. And that's kind of what we see that happening in certain songs and certain music, where you may be listening to a song, and I don't want to go like the way they did it in the 50s, where you go out and you burn records or anything, but you may be listening to a song that's actually got a real ritual in it, and you may not know that, and it could conjure something up into your house. And it's ironically enough that the guy that wrote the song, the guy that performs the music, is telling you not to listen to that song, The Conjuring, off of that album. And so that was pretty strange when I heard that. And when you're talking about the Crowley deck and what it did to you, again, there's certain items that can, just for you having them, can bring up negative energy, negative things into your life. And you got to be careful on what you listen to, what you have, because you never know.
Absolutely. I mean, these things, you know, they're not just silly old superstitions that people have dreamt up over the years. You know, these things have real power.
Yeah.
And I think it's also fascinating to me because I've done I've been at the location several times at the beginning of the 1900s where Sir Arthur Conan Doyle was very into the spiritualism movement, where he was involved in um, seances and mediumship and all that. And I think it really brought into the forefront in regards to psychics, mediums, and using seances uh, into the forefront, where it became not really accepted, but they were doing scientific research on that, where they were documenting what happened um, during seances when they had mediumship and all that. Because I know a lot of times, even in the Victorian times, it was all the rage, the spiritualism movement for a lot of upper crust people. It was a hobby for them.
Oh, absolutely. And they would have their little parlour meetings as well, wouldn't they? Where they would practice a bit of mediumship or seances. Yeah, I mean, obviously, spirituality has evolved since then. But yeah, they did a hell of a lot of research. I did study for a while philosophy. So yeah, it's been something that, but it's kept very much behind closed doors, you know.
Yeah. And before we go here, I want to, just for our audience listening, if we could go into what should they put in their homes, like plant wise or anything like that, if they wanted like just positive energy around, if they wanted to keep negative things around away from them, what would you suggest they have around their homes to keep out the negativity?
I would definitely suggest that they invest in having something to cleanse the property, you know, such as sage or Palo Santo. Bay Apparently bay leaves are supposed, or bay trees, sorry, bay trees are supposed to be very, very good luck, very good luck. So that would be an excellent plant to have maybe outside the front of your house or even inside of the house. Um, Things like amethyst as well keep the energy clear. Like I said, I do love selenite because that really does help raise the vibration of a room or a building as well. And I've got various pieces of that I've got dotted around.
Okay. All right. So, is there anything else you would like to say before we wrap up the show?
No, except for thank you for this opportunity. It's been a wonderful thing.
No, we appreciate you coming on and joining us as a guest. It's great to have you on the show.
And like I said, we
Wonderful.
we really appreciate you taking the time to share with us and our listeners your wisdom and your knowledge. And it's just incredible that we have someone, of your caliber, a multi-award winner psychic of the year. I think it's absolutely incredible. And you've given a lot of information for us and our listeners, a little bit of food for thought. And we appreciate that.
Oh, you're more than welcome. It's been an absolute pleasure. It really has.
Okay. All right. Well, you enjoy the rest of your day, and
Oh, thank you. Can't wait.
all right, thank
Thank you.
you.
Enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye bye.
And you. Bye.
Bye.